Good afternoon, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak here today. I'm Elizabeth McNeese. I'm an Ohio mother who has spent my recent years advocating for reform and justice in our courts. I've co-authored legislation and been working directly with our lawmakers to try and make things better for Ohio families, and I've hit a lot of walls. People tend to associate qualified immunity with law enforcement and how qualified immunity protects bad actors. And it's an easy thing to point to because there's a lot of examples to consider, but it really is much deeper than that. Qualified immunity has become highly politicized. I'm sure I don't have to tell you that. Tragically, it's become a blue versus red topic. And that's really unfortunate because we've become so divided into party lines that we are easily swayed into believing that we're fighting each other over this issue. But that's the wrong way of thinking about qualified immunity, because this is not Democrat versus Republican, because at its heart, qualified immunity is we the people versus the government. It's we know what's best for us versus the government knows what's best for us. And it goes way beyond law enforcement and their ineffective self-governance. That's just the most visible tip of the spear. There are other, more powerful, nefarious characters lurking in the background of every story. You see, all of these cases are at the mercy of the mighty power of Ohio courts. Judges, magistrates, prosecutors, court-appointed investigators. It's these court actors who hold the fate of victims and their families in their hands. It's up to the courts to apply or not apply qualified immunity. I was surprised to learn that qualified immunity came down from SCOTUS back in the 60s. It's not law, it didn't exist in our nation's founding, and it's never been codified. It's a legal doctrine created by the judiciary as a means to shield the government from the people. It's the courts who are ultimately shielding themselves and all the others from accountability, even when they clearly violate our rights. Today, we are shining light into the dark shadows and the cobwebs of deceit that have plagued our courts for decades. Gone are the days of the judiciary being the beacon of light and justice, where truth prevails and each person has a right of due process and a fair hearing. Today's courts create their own laws, as evidenced by the doctrine of qualified immunity. They stomp on our constitutional rights for their own self-preservation and power because they know what's best, of course. Take, for instance, Ohio's family courts. Despite having fundamentally protected rights as parents to the care and custody of our children, it's their rulings that decide who raises a child or how that child will be raised, or whether a parent loses contact with their child altogether. And they do this without any allegations or findings that a parent is unfit or a danger to their child, clearly violating many of our constitutional rights, and yet nobody with the authority to help really cares. Prosecutors, CPS investigators, guardians ad litem, and court-appointed evaluators swarm in like a cartel, trafficking children and bankrupting Ohio's families. And when these officials overstep, say by ignoring evidence or denying due process, the consequences are life-altering, yet qualified immunity shields them all from true accountability. Today, when judges misbehave, they get the home field advantage of answering to each other. Judges judging judges. The most common outcome of complaints is either dismissal of the complaint, incredibly short-term suspensions, or voluntary retirement, which allows those same judges to continue on the bench in an unelected capacity as a visiting judge, still funded by taxpayers. It's very similar to the way problematic law enforcement officers are just reassigned to another precinct or district, and it's just enough to make it look like they're policing themselves when very few are really treated seriously. Look at Judge Celebrezzi from Cuyahoga County. She spent her 2 decades on the bench steering cases and hundreds of thousands of litigants' dollars towards her personal friends. Yes, she did get caught, and she got publicly called out for it, but what did the disciplinary council recommend? 1 year or less for good behavior, suspension, and then she can return to the bench. Judge Celebrezzi is one of many. A common complaint from litigants is how collusion is rampant, and it's very obvious, and they don't even care to hide it. Ohioans just flat out don't trust the judiciary, for good reason. Elected judges walk the sacred halls of this very state house, writing and lobbying bills, such as Senate Bill 174 right now, which they proudly wrote and, not surprisingly, gives themselves more power. But instead of the legislature keeping the judiciary in check, they champion these causes on behalf of the judges and even provide their lobbyists funding in our state's budget. This is an egregious violation of the separation of powers, and yet they are unfazed. It is not the job of our elected representatives to be buddies with the judiciary. On the contrary, our three branches of power are supposed to be holding each other accountable. Instead, they're working for each other and against the people of Ohio. If the legislature won't hold the judiciary accountable, it's up to us. We, the people, must say enough is enough. This proposed amendment aims to address this gap by allowing lawsuits against judges and other court actors for constitutional violations. Courts, all courts, hold immense power over our most sacred bonds and rights as Americans. When courts are shielded from accountability, it blocks justice and erodes the public's trust. And over time, they become our overlords, dictating the most intimate details of our lives with unstoppable power. It's the judges in Ohio who possess the most power. And that is why this effort has faced such steep obstacles. Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost blocked the coalition's petition for over 2 years. But in April, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld that Yost's actions violated our First Amendment rights. The irony is not lost on us. The powers that be do not care that we have constitutional rights when those rights restrict their authority. They're far too comfortable, and it is time that that comfort ends. In my years of court reform advocacy, I've seen a general disdain toward the people coming from those who we elected to be our public servants. They, as the professionals, know better than we do. And it permeates all the agencies too, where administrative rules and decisions directly violate our rights with no recourse for the people who must submit to our overlords or face the consequences. This is a big ask, and the stakes are very high. But ending qualified immunity could restore fairness in our courts and curb agency overreach. Lawsuits could hold judges accountable for denying our constitutional rights or colluding with other court officials as they violate our rights. Measures like this could also drive reforms, like better training for judges, court officials, law enforcement, for everyone. Today, Ohio has a chance to lead, ensuring our courts uphold justice, not shield misconduct. We're not after revenge. We just want the people working in government to play by the same rules as the rest of us, and for courts to stop creating the law and to simply uphold it. In closing, our constitutional rights to due process, to fairness, family unity, are only as strong as our ability to enforce them. Qualified immunity weakens that strength, shielding actors when they fail us, and it must go. In Ohio, we have a historic opportunity to change this. So let's build a society where accountability is the norm, where trust is restored, and where every Ohioan is protected.